A kitchen table, a coffee gone cold, a man named David, 64, staring at a single sheet of paper like it might rearrange itself if he looked hard enough. It won't. 2 years ago, this same table held a different scene. Champagne, his wife's hand in his, the words "we made it" still hanging in the air. Tonight, the only sound is the clock. Because David is about to learn something almost nobody tells you about money. The moment that breaks you isn't always a single disaster. Sometimes it's the slow arithmetic of 10 quiet choices made decades apart that finally catches up to you in one evening. We're going to count those 10 choices backward, from the one that simply chipped away at his future to the one hiding underneath every other decision he ever made. Stick around for number 1. It isn't about money at all. Number 10. The question he wasn't ready for. 6 years earlier, David, 58, sat across a polished desk from a planner he'd booked almost on a whim. He hadn't come for advice. He'd come for permission. A confident stranger to tell him everything was fine. Can I still retire comfortably? The planner studied the spreadsheet for a long moment, long enough that David's stomach tightened before a word was said. Maybe, the planner finally answered, but you'd be standing somewhere very different if we'd had this conversation 15 years ago. Here's a pattern almost nobody escapes. Ask a 25-year-old about retirement, and they'll laugh it off. Ask a 62-year-old the same question, and an astonishing number say the exact same 6 words. I wish I had started earlier. David didn't argue. He just sat there, doing silent math on years he could no longer get back. What he didn't know yet was that this wasn't really about when he started. It was about what 15 lost years had quietly cost him on the way up, starting with a paycheck that should have made him richer, and somehow didn't. Number 9. The raise nobody notices. Disappearing. Picture David at 28. A 1-bedroom apartment, a Honda with 90,000 miles on it, and just enough left over each month to feel proud of himself. Now fast forward a decade. 2 promotions, a salary that had quietly doubled, then doubled again. By every visible measure, David had made it. Bigger house, newer car, the kind of vacations his younger self could only scroll past online. His wife, Claire, used to joke that their life had gotten a glow-up. What neither of them noticed was the number that didn't grow alongside everything else, his savings balance, sitting almost exactly where it had been years before. This has a name, lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the few financial traps that doesn't feel like a mistake while it's happening. It feels like a reward, like proof you're winning. Here's the quiet math nobody puts on a billboard. Every raise is a fork in the road. One path buys comfort that evaporates by the next paycheck. The other buys decades of freedom. David kept choosing comfort, not because he was careless, but because nobody ever showed him the second path even existed. And the people who did offer him direction, that's where things got even more dangerous. Number 8, the confidence trap. 3 friends, 1 question. 3 completely different answers, and not one of them right. David was 31, sitting in a backyard with a beer in his hand, asking what he should do with the small cushion he'd finally saved. Real estate. Always. Buy the biggest house the bank will give you. Forget all that. You're only young once. Put it all in one stock. My cousin doubled his money in a year. 3 voices, all certain, none of them holding a single credential, a single track record, a single reason to be trusted with someone else's future. Here's something strange about human nature. We'd never let a stranger with no medical training set our broken arm. But hand that same stranger a beer and ask about money, and suddenly their confidence is enough. Confidence is loud. Competence is usually quiet. David picked the advice that felt most comfortable to hear, not the one that was actually true. He carried it for almost 2 decades, unaware he was drifting further from where he wanted to be with every passing year. That drift eventually built something far more fragile than David ever realized he was standing on. Number 7. One pillar holding up everything. If this one check stopped coming tomorrow, what would actually happen to you? David's advisor asked it plainly, almost casually, the way you'd ask about the weather. David opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Nearly his entire retirement rested on a single pension. One source, one pillar holding up an entire structure of plans, promises, and assumptions about the rest of his life. Architects will tell you something interesting. A single pillar structure can stand beautifully for years, right up until the moment that pillar shifts even slightly. Then everything above it goes with it. People who quietly build wealth rarely talk about investing. They talk about income streams, plural, redundant, boring on purpose. Not because they're paranoid, but because they understand a simple law. Whatever you depend on completely eventually owns you. David had built a beautiful house. He just hadn't noticed it only had one leg to stand on. And that leg was about to be tested by something no spreadsheet could have warned him about. Number 6. The appointment. 62. Finally retired. The alarm clock silenced for good. For nearly 2 years, life unfolded exactly as planned. Slow mornings, longer walks, Claire finally getting the kitchen renovation she'd wanted for a decade. Then came an ordinary Tuesday, and a routine checkup that turned into, let's run a few more tests, which turned into a specialist, which turned into months of bills arriving like a slow drip nobody could shut off. Prescriptions here, a scan there, a deductible David hadn't budgeted for because how could he have known? Here's a fact that surprises almost everyone. According to Fidelity's most recent retiree healthcare estimate, the average 65-year-old couple retiring today should expect to spend roughly $345,000 in after-tax money on healthcare alone. And that number doesn't even include long-term care. Not luxury, not extras. Baseline. David had planned meticulously for retirement. He had never planned for aging. Those turned out to be two entirely different problems wearing the same name. This, right here, is the evening from our opening. The cold coffee, the single sheet of paper, the fear that finally had a face. But the truth is, this fear had been quietly assembling itself for 40 years, and its foundation was a number David calculated once in his 30s and never thought to question again. Number 5, a loaf of bread, 20 years apart. Rewind to David at 35, filling his tank at a gas station that, if you'd shown him today's prices, he simply wouldn't have believed. Everyone understands inflation as an idea. Almost nobody feels its true weight until it's already rewritten their life. Because inflation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't crash through the door. It seeps in like rust on the underside of a car, invisible for years, until the day the metal simply gives way. David had once landed on a number, a clean, comforting figure he believed would carry him through retirement. He never went back and asked what that same number would actually be worth 30 years later. By the time he understood, nearly everything around him, groceries, insurance, the cost of simply staying alive, had quietly moved on without waiting for him to catch up. The number wasn't wrong when he calculated it. It was wrong because he never recalculated it. And that wasn't even his only blind spot about what retirement would actually look like. Number 4, the retirement he pictured versus the one he got. Close your eyes and picture retirement. Slower mornings, less traffic, a simpler life with a smaller price tag. That's exactly what David and Claire pictured too. They built a budget around it. Clean, careful, color-coded. Reality had other plans. The roof needed replacing. Their granddaughter needed help with tuition nobody had budgeted for. A family emergency arrived, and then, almost cruelly, another. Within 3 years, the tidy budget David had trusted for over a decade looked nothing like the life he was actually living. Here's the part that catches most retirees off guard. Spending often goes up in the first few years of retirement, not down. Travel, grandchildren, hobbies people delayed for 40 years, suddenly all arriving at once. Retirement didn't shrink David's expenses. It just renamed them. And underneath that miscalculation sat a much older habit, one Claire had gently questioned years earlier, back when David was still in his 30s. Number 3, the safety that wasn't. Why would I take a risk when I can just save? David said this to Claire more than once in his 30s, and at the time, it sounded unshakably reasonable. Every month, a piece of his paycheck slid quietly into a savings account. No volatility, no stress, no headlines to worry about. It felt responsible. It felt like the version of himself his parents would have been proud of. Picture an ice cube sitting in a glass on a warm counter. Nobody's touching it. Nobody's done anything wrong. And yet, hour by hour, it shrinks. That's what inflation does to cash that never moves. David wasn't losing money. He was losing what that money could buy. A difference so slow, it took him 3 decades to notice. He had built a fortress to protect his money. He never built an engine to grow it. And that single decision, safety over growth, traced all the way back to one moment, years earlier, when David was only 26 and still believed he had all the time in the world. Number 2, the year he decided to wait. David, 26, a union rep finishing a forgettable lunchtime talk on retirement accounts. David, half listening, telling himself he'd start once things settled down, maybe at 30. 30 arrived. A wedding, a mortgage, a first child crying through the night. 35 felt more realistic. Then 40 did too. Each delay sounded perfectly rational in the moment. He was still working, still earning, still doing fine. What's one more year? Here's the math that should be taught in every classroom in the country. Fidelity has run the numbers on this exact scenario. One saver starting at 25, another at 30, both investing the same amount monthly at a typical 7% return until age 67. The early starter retires with roughly $450,000 more, despite contributing only $30,000 less over her lifetime. 5 years of waiting, nearly $500,000 gone. Not because of bad investments, because of bad timing. This decision didn't feel expensive at 26. It felt like nothing at all. It only became expensive at 62, sitting at a kitchen table doing the silent math in reverse. 9 choices, 9 quiet costs, each one stacking invisibly on the last. But none of them, not one, was actually the root of what went wrong. Underneath every single decision was something David never once stopped to question. Number 1, the mistake hiding inside all the others. Here is what David believed, without ever examining it. Retirement begins the day you stop working. Sitting at that kitchen table at 64, paper in hand, Claire's footsteps somewhere upstairs, David finally understood how wrong that belief had been. His retirement hadn't started 2 years ago. It started at 26, the first time he said, "I'll start next year," and meant it sincerely. It started every time a raise turned into a bigger car instead of a bigger future. Every time he trusted confidence over a track record. Every time safe quietly became a synonym for stagnant. Plant 2 trees, one today, one 20 years from now. Same sunlight, same soil, same care given fully. Will they ever stand the same height? David had planted his late, watered it only when convenient, and never once checked whether its roots could survive a storm. He wasn't unlucky. He wasn't careless in any way that would have made a good villain in a movie. He was something far more common and far harder to forgive yourself for. Ordinary. A man who made small, forgettable decisions for 40 straight years, never once stepping back to see where the pattern was leading. That's the part almost nobody tells you. Fortunes aren't built or lost in one dramatic, cinematic moment.
They're built in the unremarkable ones, the contribution you almost skipped, the impulse purchase you talked yourself into, the confident friend you should have questioned and didn't. David's story was never really about money. It was about decisions so small they never once felt like the moment that mattered. If there's only one thing you carry out of David's kitchen tonight, let it be this. The decisions that quietly wreck a future rarely look dangerous while you're making them. They look ordinary, forgettable, almost boring. I'll start next year. I'll spend a little more. I've earned it. I'll think about it later. That's precisely what makes them so dangerous. Said once, they're harmless. Repeated for 40 years, they become someone's entire life story. The way they quietly became David's. So before this video ends, ask yourself one honest question. 20 years from tonight, will you thank yourself for the decision you're about to make? Or will you be the one sitting at a kitchen table, doing the math in reverse? David never got the chance to go back and rewrite his 26-year-old choices. You still have that chance, right now, while it's still cheap. If David's story made you look at your own decisions a little differently, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe, because somewhere out there is the next story that might change yours.